street-level prevention, particularly in dangerous areas in Mexico. So in our experience, the first thing you need to do to work with these young people that are fighting the law or in conflict with the law, or people in gangs, the first thing you need to do with these young people is not try to do top-down strategies. Rather, you need to have strategies that have those young people at their heart as the primary driver of the strategy itself. So not simply the target of the policies, but rather the subject and the driver, the champion of these policies. This is particularly key where they're very vulnerable to crime. What's key there is the lack of social, educational and employment opportunities for young people. That increases the likelihood that they'll commit criminal acts. So in order to design more effective policies which address these challenges, you need to look at the context in which young people exist and consider marginalization, exclusion and stigma that they often face. There's also a lack of basic skills often found among these young people. And you need to look at the risky context in which they live, and that renders things all the more complex still. Organized crime, at least in Mexico and surely in the rest of the region, harnesses the fact that there's a sort of delinquent fabric to society, and that's something we can't lose sight of. So we need to have strategies that young people can identify with. We need to give them a sense of belonging. We need to go down to territorial level and rethink human resources, how we're going to work with them in territories affected by crime. What's been very effective for us is working with the young people themselves that previously were in trouble with the law. They then help us to attract other young people to our work. They kind of feel a certain affinity with them, they understand their experience, and that provides a different perspective. Sports, another interesting avenue. Through sporting strategies, we, for example, have a program where we work inside prisons on social reintegration, and this program looks to ensure that those that committed a crime once don't do so again. Unfortunately, 1 out of every 4 people in Mexico are recidivists, and 50% of those do it within 2 years. So what we're looking to have is a model where boxing, in this case, boxing is very popular in Mexico. It's a very neighborhood sport, and using boxing creates this sense of belonging and identity, and we have boxing champions working with us to train these young people in conflict with the law, and that creates this kind of model to follow. These people, these champions, stand as an example for young people to follow. We work with, of course, many different sports, not only boxing. It depends where we're working. We tailor our programs to specific contexts. Sometimes some sports are more popular in some neighborhoods than others. Boxing also helps us with addiction reduction. We've done those two things. We've put those two things together. We've kind of had a before and after with our work. Young people themselves have said that boxing serves as almost a substitute drug almost. Of course, when we do these programs, we work with experts so that when in a state of crisis, these young people can get help so that they don't use drugs again. Sometimes they're using very hard drugs, meth, heroin. So in light of all of that, my advice to you would be, in terms of being successful when working with young people in neighborhoods and at a territorial level, would be not to only look at them as the subject or the target of policies, but as the drivers of them. It sounds easy, but it is difficult. You need to get people involved at a community level so that a policy is sustainable over time. We're also successful in working with football. There's a program in Mexico that's called From the Sport to the Pitch, and that's also been something we've worked on. We've also worked at a local level to transform public spaces using colour, and we've invited professional football teams to come and put together teams in these neighbourhoods affected by crime and drugs so that they can sort of set an example for young people to follow. In these risky, dangerous contexts where there is a risk of crime, we have to compete against crime almost, because crime is there and crime becomes the model for them to follow. And we have to provide alternative models to follow. Of course, our work is evidence-based, but we have to work with smart strategies too that mean that we almost, quote unquote, get hold of these young people before crime. For example, you have the neighborhood called Tepito in Mexico, known for crime, smuggling, and we kind of developed a clothing brand with young people and women in that neighborhood that brand says, if it's not from here, it's smuggled. So we kind of appropriate smuggling and give them an alternative. In fact, our brand all came to the Fashion Week 2 years ago in New York. So that's another example. Sports help us to ensure that young people come together, work as a team, and that they're able to, in doing that, develop lifelong skills. And that means that they'll have less stigma. That's another achievement we've notched up. That is integrating people in their communities. And we've brought people to crime-affected communities to get rid of their stigma. What we have also are mediation processes so that warring people in communities reach agreements, so that these people are seen differently once again by their communities. So perceptions of them change. Sport's been a tool to do that. Of course, it's gone hand in hand with other tools. Of course, we've had emotional support, reconciliation and forgiveness workshops, and we've used other strategies at a territorial level that have gone hand in hand with sport. But it's important, again, that those vulnerable to crime are part of the programs. We don't simply go to neighborhoods to teach. It's a circular process. There's teaching, mutual learning, and that's the only way that I think you can have sustainable strategies when it comes to socially preventing violence and crime. Of course, we also have to understand that often we work in very dangerous contexts in Tierra Caliente, Oaxaca, Guadalajara, areas that are a high risk of violence and crimes. There's high murder rates, homicide rates. We have to bear that in mind. Something that protects us when working in those areas is that we have these ties with the people in the community, because they see us with their eyes and vice versa. We don't criminalize them or stigmatize them, and they don't do that to us either. That means that we can more delicately enter a community and more simply enter a community, and ultimately create much more effective strategies when tackling the social causes of crime. I just want to say that no one is born a criminal. Risk factors, contextual factors, are the things that make people fall into a life of crime and mean that other people don't. 96% of those committing crime were once victims of crime themselves. So we need to eradicate these risk factors and transform these crime-ridden communities. We need to go not always where there's a highest number of murders, but rather, or muggings or whatever. We need to go to where the people committing those crimes live and transform, as I said, the risk factors through sport, by giving lifelong skills, through social cohesion, and through transforming public spaces. Thank you.